There's something happening inside you right now that you didn't choose. Something that started quietly, without a ceremony, without a warning. Just a slow accumulation of moments. A conversation that went too long. A silence that felt safe. A look across a room that meant something you still haven't found the right words for. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, without asking your permission, your mind did something extraordinary. It built a room. Not a metaphor, not poetry. An actual, neurological, irreversible room. With walls shaped exactly like one person. With a door that only opens from the inside. And no matter how many people walk through your life after this, no matter how worthy, how beautiful, how well-intentioned, none of them will ever fit in that room. Because it was built for someone specific. And here's what nobody tells you. That person may not even know the room exists. Part 1. The brain science. Here is what is actually happening inside your brain when someone becomes this person for you. Most people you encounter, your brain processes them efficiently, categorically. It files them into existing mental templates. A coworker, an acquaintance, someone you smiled at once. These people get a shortcut. Your brain doesn't build them a room. It assigns them a folder in a filing cabinet that already existed before they showed up. But then there are the exceptions. And the exceptions are different at the level of biology. Neuroscience researchers using brain scanning technology have discovered that the closer your relationship with someone, the more unique and individualized the neural pattern your brain uses to represent them becomes, particularly in the regions responsible for understanding other people and feeling emotion. What this means is that this person doesn't just have a bigger folder in your mental filing cabinet. They have an entirely different kind of architecture. A pattern your brain has never used for anyone else. A one-of-a-kind neural fingerprint. You didn't choose this. It happened the way fingerprints happen, slowly, through contact, through pressure, through time. But it goes further than that. Because at a certain point, and this is the part that sounds impossible, but isn't, your brain begins to confuse them with you. Researchers studying close relationships have found something they call self-other overlap. As two people grow closer, something measurable happens in the brain. It becomes harder and harder to separate information about yourself from information about the other person. Their preferences start living in your prefrontal cortex next to your own. Their memories begin to share space with yours. You start to feel what they feel before they've said a word, because your brain has already predicted it, because it has built an entire model of them inside you. You didn't absorb them on purpose. You just spent enough time in proximity to someone the brain decided was significant. And significance to the brain is not a feeling. It's a structural change. And here is the detail almost no one talks about. That overlap doesn't just make you feel closer to them. It costs you something measurable. Studies have shown that self-other overlap actually impairs your ability to think clearly, make decisions, and remember things accurately when you are around them or working with them. The more deeply you love someone, the more their presence introduces a kind of beautiful cognitive interference, because your brain is running two operating systems at once and can no longer cleanly tell them apart. Loving someone truly is expensive. The brain pays for it in the currency of clarity. Part 2. The chemistry. There is a neurochemical called oxytocin. You have probably heard of it. It is usually described as the bonding hormone, the love chemical, the thing that flows between a mother and her newborn. But what the popular version leaves out is far more interesting. Oxytocin doesn't just create warmth. It amplifies signal. Research has found that oxytocin acts on the brain like someone turning up the volume on whatever it considers socially relevant. Every sensory signal that comes from a person the brain has bonded with, their voice, their face, the specific way they laugh, the exact temperature of their hand, gets processed louder, with more weight, more urgency, more detail. What this means is that to this person, You are louder than other people, not because you speak more, but because their neurochemistry has permanently increased the volume on you. Your presence registers in a way no one else's does. When you walk into a room, something in them responds before their conscious mind has even processed the fact that you've arrived. You have become, at the level of biology, a priority signal. And simultaneously, something else was happening. Because every time they were near you, every repeated thought they had about you, every memory formed with you present, their brain was doing something called synaptic reinforcement, building a pathway. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That pathway, once built, doesn't dissolve when you leave. It remains, waiting, sending signals into a silence. Which is why missing someone doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like noise. Part 3, the unconscious. Here is the part that is perhaps the most quietly devastating. They may not have had a choice. The unconscious mind operates on a timeline and a logic entirely separate from the one we use when we speak, when we reason, when we tell ourselves stories about who we love and why. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional significance, can flag someone as important in milliseconds. Before you've learned their last name, before you've seen them at their worst, before you have any rational basis for the certainty you feel. The body responds. The hands may tremble slightly. Something shifts in the chest. The brain marks the moment with an unconscious asterisk. This one. Remember this one. And yet the person experiencing it may not register any of it consciously. They just find themselves thinking about you. They find themselves slightly agitated when you're distant, and slightly more alive when you're near. They can't fully explain it. They don't know there is a room. They just know that something in them functions differently in your presence. This is what neuroscientists call right brain to right brain communication. The emotional, nonverbal, intuitive hemisphere, the one that processes faces and voices and the space between words, builds its most important bonds below the level of language. There is no verbal narrative that captures what happened. There is only the result, a reorganization of what matters. And the unconscious doesn't lie about what matters. This is worth holding for a moment. When the anxious ones, the avoidant ones, the ones who have spent years convincing themselves they don't need anyone, when they allow someone in, it isn't a conscious decision. Research shows that people who habitually keep others at a distance activate their attachment systems most intensely, most involuntarily, under stress. The defenses go up everywhere, except where the attachment has already formed. Even the most guarded person in the world cannot guard themselves against a room that is already built. Part 4. What it means to be someone's exception. Let's talk about what it actually means, what it looks like from the inside, to be the person someone placed in that space. It doesn't always look like grand declarations. It rarely does. It looks like the fact that when they receive news, good or bad, your name is the first one that moves through them before they've decided to tell anyone. It looks like the way they reference you in conversations you're not part of, long after the subject has moved on. It looks like the specific quality of their attention when you're speaking. Not polite attention, not patient attention, but the kind of attention that is actually recording, that believes what you say matters enough to keep. It looks like the fact that they find it difficult to make decisions that involve you, because your presence has introduced a variable into their cognition that doesn't simplify. You complicate their calculations in the way that only the important things do. And here is something that almost nobody says out loud. The space they built for you was not a vacancy they were advertising. They weren't waiting for someone to fill it. They may not have known it was possible. You didn't step into a role. You revealed one. The need you answered was one they didn't know they had, until you showed them it could be met. This is not the same as being needed. Being needed is functional. This is something different. This is being the person through whom someone discovered a version of themselves they wouldn't have found otherwise. Because the research on what happens to people in close relationships reveals this. The self expands. You do not stay the same person you were before someone truly significant enters your life. You gain, through them, access to perspectives and ways of being and capacities you could not have developed alone. And that expansion doesn't fully reverse when the relationship changes form. You carry what they gave you. Which means that somewhere, this person is walking around with pieces of you in them, that they can no longer fully separate from themselves. Now here is the thing about rooms. If a room is built for one person, shaped specifically, precisely, irreducibly to the dimensions of one presence, then no other presence will occupy it correctly. This is not pessimism. It is not a reason to despair, but it is the truth that grief requires us to face. When someone who held a space like this is gone, through distance, through rupture, through death, through the ordinary cruelties of time, the room does not immediately know. The brain keeps running its program. It keeps generating expectations. It keeps predicting their voice in certain moments, their name in certain situations, their presence in spaces they used to inhabit. And when the prediction runs, and there is no input, when the program executes and returns nothing, that is what grief feels like. It is not simply sadness. It is a system trying to function around a fundamental absence. A door that keeps opening onto a room that no one walks out of. The brain learns absence slowly. It does not update the way a calendar updates. It requires repeated confrontation with the fact of the missing before it begins, cautiously, reluctantly, to revise its expectations. The room does not fill with someone else. The room may change. Life may expand around it. New rooms may be built. But the original architecture remains, shaped exactly like the person who was there, inaccessible to substitution. This is why some people, years later, decades later, encounter something small, a song, a smell, a quality of afternoon light, and are briefly flooded, not because they haven't healed, but because the neural pathway is still there, still wired, still waiting. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we've covered. The space someone gives you in their mind, a space built from repeated presence, from mutual attention, from the slow accumulation of moments that mattered, is not something you earn. It is not something you can perform your way into or lose through a single failure. It forms the way geological formations form, through patient, ordinary pressure over time. And if someone has given you that space, if you are the person whose name runs through them before they've decided to speak it, whose absence creates a shape rather than just a feeling, whose presence reorganizes how their nervous system processes the world, then you are not just someone they love. You are someone they have become around. That is not a small thing. Most people go through their entire lives never fully occupying this space for anyone. They are present, they are good, they are remembered, but they are not structurally necessary to another person's sense of self. They do not leave a room-shaped absence when they go. You did. And here is the strangest, most quietly important part of all of this. You may have done it without trying. You may have simply shown up and been honest and stayed long enough for the brain to decide that you were safe. And that is all it took. Because safety, to a nervous system that has spent years protecting itself from disappointment, safety is the rarest, most luxurious gift one person can give another. They didn't choose to build the room. The room built itself around you, while you were just being who you are. And no one else can tear it down. Not time, not distance, not the arrival of someone new, someone better on paper, someone more available, or more convenient, or more easily explained to the people in their life who never understood why you mattered so much. The room was built for you, and it will carry your shape for as long as they carry themselves.